All I wanted to do was show off my snazzy new Ford Ranger truck and sneak a few beers to the lake. If I knew pulling a harmless prank on Reedy would lead to damaging that truck and having to find a way to hide the ordeal from my father, well, I would have made other plans. This week's tale is about when Reedy got his hands on a bottle of Grape Mad Dog 2020 in the 90s. And that debauchery ultimately led him to performing manual labor for my dad. Watch the video to see the craziness unfold. I'm Bill Roseberry. Welcome to my channel, Bill Roseberry Stories, and enjoy this original feature serving up an authentic narrative with heavy doses of Gen X nostalgia, which we do on the regular.
I gripped the steering wheel tight and scanned the interior of my new toy. A sudden wave of anticipation hit me. It was time to make the trek, grab Reedy, and head for the lake. I'd been pretty hesitant at the initial proposition by my parents of getting rid of my 1982 Mustang GT. That bright red sports car wasn't just my ride. It had been a massive piece of my identity since I got my driver's license. But now that I was officially a high school graduate, my folks had presented me with a surprisingly cool parting gift from my prep days. A gray 1986 Ford Ranger 4 pickup. With a weekend at Gillespie Lake lined up with the boys, I was finally going to get my chance to show it off. To sweeten the deal, Reedy had scored some beer from an older buddy, so our weekend entertainment was officially booked to boot. As I whipped into Reedy's driveway, I saw him in his front yard smoking chair, shirtless and a Marlboro Red dangling from his lips. I rolled the window down and hollered, "Come on, man, I want to get to the lake. Go put a shirt on and let's go. Nobody wants to see that anyway." "I don't care, I'm comfortable," Reedy barked back. "Well, get comfortable in a shirt," I retorted. He glared back at me, flicked his glowing cigarette butt into the grass, and stomped inside. When he finally reappeared, he was thankfully clothed and jingling the keys to his car. I watched as he popped the hatch on his Escort and pulled two 12-packs of Bud Light out, and as a surprise, two glistening bottles of Grape Mad Dog 2020. My eyes nearly popped out of my head as he loaded the contraband into the Ranger's extended cab. "You got Mad Dog?" "Man, it's going to be a long weekend," I said in amazement. "Hell yeah, I got the hookup," Reedy responded coolly. On the drive up, we pulled off to grab a bag of ice, slyly burying the beer and the liquor deep inside the cooler so no watchful eyes would spot our illicit payload. At 17 and 18 respectively, neither of us wanted to deal with the legal repercussions, or worse, the terrifying, scorched earth wrath of our parents. When we pulled into the Gillespie Lake campgrounds, we felt like rock stars. We were sporting a new ride to show off and touting a respectable stash of booze. We were going to be the talk of Gillespie. Unfortunately, we lacked one crucial asset for the weekend: boat access. We were relegated to setting up camp at Wilson's parents' campsite, which meant basic tents and sleeping bags on the hard ground. I was honestly still surprised Reedy had agreed to this. He was definitely not a sleep on the dirt kind of guy. It was a serene Midwestern Friday evening. All around us, families were leveling their campers, firing up charcoal grills, and unfolding lawn chairs. We cruised along the winding gravel road, dust kicking up through the trees as we watched everyone settle in for the weekend. Then the dense tree line parted, the skies opened up, and the calm blue expanse of the lake burst into view. The water caught the fading light like a landscape painting. This was our happy place. Down at the beach, a handful of kids and younger teenagers are splashing around in the swimming area. A few fishermen were backing their boat trailers down the ramp, and a thick row of parked cars lined the lot. That crowded parking area was going to provide the ultimate camouflage for our after-dark underage drinking operation. I scouted out a stealthy parking space, strictly shielded from the view of the lake police, who operated out of a tiny, watchful shack perched at the top of the hill above the docks. That lot was set to be ground zero for our late-night rendezvous. We were meeting Wilson, Bart, Andre, and Hawk for the weekend. They knew Reedy and I had the goods. I had the new wheels, and my Ranger was serving as cover for our boozing extravaganza. Once I killed the engine, Reedy and I hiked up the hill to the campsite. The rest of the guys were already there, hanging out alongside Wilson's parents and a few of their adult friends. Wilson's dad was hard at work over a fiery grill, flipping burgers, brats, and hot dogs. It was time to chow down before we hit the bottle. "What up, fellas?" Reedy said as we strolled into camp. Bart approached us like a shady operative, his head whipping left and right to check for adult radar. He looked like he was trying to execute a high-stake drug deal. You got the stuff with you? What were you able to get?" he coaxed nervously. Reedy raised a massive hand and wrinkled his forehead in annoyance. "Chill, dude, we got it. We'll get to it. I want one of those burgers first. I need to get my grub on," he said, eyeing the dense smoke rolling off the grill while he patted his belly. "Do you have your truck down there too?" Wilson asked. "I can't wait to see it." "Yeah, it's not the Power 82 Mustang, but it's pretty cool. I'm getting used to it," I replied. Wilson's dad waved us over to the picnic table, and none of us hesitated for a second. Teenage boys never skip a free meal. It's a universal law I knew all too well. With our bellies full, we pitched the tent and unrolled our sleeping bags while we still had daylight. We knew once night fell and we reached the level of inebriation we were aiming for, setting up camp would be a total disaster. I could already picture us swaying, tripping over guy lines, and stumbling around in the dark. Or worse, just passing out on the open grass and drawing heat from the adults in the morning. With our housing secured, we offered our polite goodbyes to the adults and trekked back down to my truck. Twilight was setting in, offering just enough light for a quick vehicle tour before we officially cracked open the suds. "Wow, this is really nice," Wilson said, admiringly running his fingers down the smooth front fender. Bart, Andre, and Hawk piled inside, soaking up the feel of my new ride. "I'm going to throw a big-ass system in here, get some new rims and some running boards. I'm going to pimp this bad boy out," I announced with pride. "Man, calm down there, Rico Suave. No amount of cool system or sweet ride could make you look like a pimp," Reedy responded with a booming belly laugh, which got rousing chatter from the rest of the group, too. "Whatever. Are you guys ready to see this stash we brought?" I shot back, frantically deflecting the attention away from myself. I pulled the cooler out and popped the lid. It felt as if a magical light from the heavens radiated straight down onto our precious payload. In reality, it was just the flicker of an overhead lamppost buzzing to life. But in the moment, it felt majestic. Reedy plunged his hand past the ice, bypassing the beer, and hauled out a bottle of Mad Dog 2020. Every eye in the group widened. "No way! You got Mad Dog?" Bart said with delight. "Hell yeah, and it's great! The good shit," Reedy declared. He twisted off the cap with a sharp snap, took a massive swig, and passed the bottle to Bart. I reached in, grabbed a few cans of Bud Light, and tossed them out to Wilson, Andre, and Hawk. We leaned against the truck and threw back drinks as dusk turned to pitch black. Reedy was aggressively hogging the Mad Dog. He polished off the first bottle practically by himself, with very little help from us, and he was already reaching for the second one when Hawk dropped the bombshell that he was calling it a night. By now, Reedy was visibly swaying, his laugh a little too loud. At Hawk's announcement, his face suddenly fell into a dead serious scowl. "No, dude, stay and drink with us," Reedy insisted, slurring slightly as he threw a massive arm around Hawk's shoulder, nearly taking him down. Nah, I'm tired, and I've had a couple of beers. That's enough for me. You enjoy that great mad dog, though, big guy, Hawk said, patting Reedy's solid back. He waved to us and melted into the darkness, heading back to the tents. We waved back and turned our attention back to the cooler. Reedy was getting good and sloshed. Sensing an opportunity for chaos, Wilson and Andre quickly hatched a plan to mess with him. The second Reedy stumbled off into the bushes to take a leak, they leaned in to pitch it to the rest of us. Let's mess with Reedy and tell him someone kidnapped Hawk from the campsite. It'll get him all fired up. It'll be funny, Wilson whispered, giggling. Andre, Bart, and I instantly cracked up in agreement. Moments later, Reedy came heavy-stepping back toward the truck, laser-focused on retrieving his second bottle of wine. We instantly stepped in his path, faces fixed in rehearsed panic. Andre placed a solemn hand on Reedy's hulking shoulder. Hey, bro, I got some bad news, Andre said, dropping his tone quickly. Somebody went into camp and kidnapped Hawk. We can't find him. We were expecting a gasp, maybe a confused pause. We were not counting on what happened. The reaction was instant, explosive, and terrifying. Reedy exploded into a dead sprint straight up the hill. For a guy his size, when he decided to move, he was shockingly fast and nimble. A runaway freight train in tennis shoes. Hawk! Hawk! I'm coming! I'm gonna fuck somebody up! He roared into the night, charging blindly up the dark slope and heading directly toward the lake police cabin. Pure horror hit us. We traded frantic looks and sprinted after him in the blackness. We managed to intercept him near the crest of the hill, right in the shadows. We formed a desperate circle around him, hands out, trying to talk him down. But Reedy was blind drunk, wildly disoriented, and completely furious. Andre made the mistake of reaching out to grab his arm from behind. Reedy felt the contact and instantly threw a terrifying backhand swing. Whoa! Andre ducked just in time as a massive gust of wind rushed right over his head from the gargantuan arm flying past. Reedy dropped into a full-on Street Fighter stance, swaying dangerously back and forth with his heavy fist raised, ready to pulverize anything that moved. What'd you do with Hawk? He growled, fists clenched, his forehead wrinkled, and his bottom lip jutting out in pure rage. I cautiously crept closer to him with my hands raised high as a peace offering. Reedy, it's Bill. Don't hit me, I pleaded, my voice cracking slightly. It's all of us. Nothing happened to Hawk. We were just messing with you. He's fine. He's sleeping at the campground. Now calm down. My diplomatic mission failed miserably. Reedy threw a heavy jab straight at my face. I launched myself backwards, narrowly avoiding a trip to the emergency room. Slowly, we managed to coax the human wrecking ball back down the incline toward the truck, successfully steering him away from the police shack. But he still refused to recognize who we were. He hadn't just consumed Mad Dog. He had morphed into a literal Mad Dog. Wilson stepped up, attempting to spit some calm logic to snap him back to reality. It seemed to be working, as Reedy paused, blinking heavily. Seeing my opening, I crept closer to snatch the half-empty bottle of fruity wine out of harm's way. Big mistake. The second my fingers grazed the glass, Reedy's free arm shot out and clamped down on me. The guy possessed terrifying, unnatural strength. I was a helpless rabbit trapped in the claws of an apex predator. Before I could even twist out of his grip, he wrapped me up and hurled me through the air with a single arm. As gravity took over and I flew backwards through the dark, a cold realization hit me. Something was about to stop my momentum. Bang! I slammed my hands out instinctively to break my fall, landing hard on the pristine front fender of my Ranger. My flat palms absorbed the impact, keeping me from crashing onto the dirt. But as I pulled myself up and looked down, absolute dread seized my chest. Staring back at me in the dim light were two massive, crater-like handprint dents embedded right into the metal. "What did you do?" I screamed, horror turning into immediate rage. "Damn it!" Whether it was the volume of my scream or the instant primal fear of what my father would do, the fog miraculously cleared from Reedy's brain. He sobered up in a fraction of a second. We all stood there speechless, staring at the two enormous dents. How the hell were we going to get out of this one? "Oh, man! Your dad is going to kill me! I'm sorry, dude!" Reedy stammered, and his head sinking low into his shoulders. My mind spun at 100 miles an hour, desperately grasping for any plausible story that would save us from an absolute execution. The structural damage was terrifying enough, but if my dad found out underage drinking was involved, I was a dead man walking. "I've got it," Wilson announced suddenly. If anyone possessed the diabolical genius required to engineer an airtight cover story, it was Wilson. "We will just say we were hanging around the truck, and you were showing it to us, and you started picking at Reedy. You started trying to wrestle with him, and not knowing his own strength, he threw you into the truck. It doesn't solve the problem of the dents, but it's believable enough to cover for the drinking," he reasoned smoothly. "We'll deal with it tomorrow. We might as well finish these beers and go to bed tonight." We all gave solemn nods of agreement. We polished off the rest of the stash and retreated to the tent. I drank more than enough to numb the anxiety and knock myself out. But the second my eyes pried open the next morning, the crushing reality of my truck rushed right back. Once we gathered our shaky faculties, the crew trekked back down to the lot to assess the carnage. Sunlight made it 10 times worse. The dents looked deeper, wider, and completely indefensible. It was official. My dad was going to slaughter us. "Well, I hope your mad dog was worth it," I said plainly, glaring at Reedy. "No, it wasn't," he muttered with a nervous chuckle. By Sunday morning, the weekend was over. Reedy and I decided to bypass all stops, drive straight to my house, and face the firing squad together. My dad was an absolute car nut. Truth be told, he seemed to care more about his automobiles than he did about my mom and me most of the time, and Reedy was full aware of it. When we pulled into the driveway, Dad was at the barn tinkering with the riding lawnmower. The fact that we pulled the truck directly up to his workspace immediately set off his radar. By the time we stepped out of the cab, Reedy and I were pale as bedsheets. Neither of us could muster the courage to make eye contact, keeping our eyes glued firmly to the dirt around our sneakers. "Okay, what happened, you two? I can tell it's not good," Dad said, stepping away from the mower with a cold, stern glare. "We got to wrestling at the lake, and I got thrown into the truck, and..." Dad didn't even bother waiting for the rest of my excuses. He bypassed us completely, walked straight to the truck, and began a slow, methodical inspection. It took him all of 2 seconds to spot the double crater. "What the hell were you thinking?" he exploded, his voice echoing off the side of the metal siding of the barn. "How can you two be that stupid and careless?" "I'm sorry, Larry. I don't know my own strength sometimes," Reedy squeaked sheepishly, looking small for the first time in his life. "I didn't mean to do it. I'll pay for it." "Damn right you will, Jason," Dad growled back. "Let me think of how you can do that. Now get away from me. I don't want to look at you two right now." We practically backstepped all the way to the truck doors. I threw it in reverse and drove Reedy home. The ride was dead silent. Reedy hated disappointing my father. They had a great relationship, and since Reedy didn't have a dad of his own, mine helped fill that void. He was visibly crushed. Don't worry, man. We'll get it figured out. He won't stay mad at you forever, I comforted as we idled outside his house. I know, dude. I just feel bad, Reedy said dejectedly, staring out the passenger window. That's why I don't usually drink like that. I don't like losing control and fucking up like that. And I don't like disappointing your dad, man. By the time I got back home, Dad had already mapped out the sentence. My uncle was about to begin a massive renovation project on the first bay of the barn, building a new awning over the concrete pad out front and ripping out wood that had been hollowed out by carpenter ants. Reedy's court-ordered restitution was simple. He was assigned to be my uncle's full-time manual laborer. He would work off every single cent of the repair bill. Dad would front the cash for the auto body shop, and once the labor was completed, the whole dark chapter would be put in the rearview mirror. When the work started, Reedy showed up gung-ho and ready to grind, with exactly one non-negotiable clause. He absolutely, under any circumstances, refused to climb a ladder. So my uncle handled all the high-altitude work while Reedy dutifully hauled heavy tools and lumber back and forth across the yard without a single word of complaint. Eventually, he even managed to compromise, bravely stepping up onto the very first rung of the ladder to hand materials up when necessary. But going any higher was an absolute hard line. Still, he showed up on time every single day until the last piece of wood was nailed down. More importantly, the truck got restored to its former glory, and not a single adult ever discovered we were blindingly drunk when the chaos went down. All things considered, that was a massive win in my book.
This might have been the drunkest I'd ever seen Reedy. Unluckily for me, it didn't stunt his strength. Man, I hit the front fender of that truck hard when he tossed me into it. This dude was naturally strong. He did sincerely feel bad about everything after it happened, though. Now I want to hear from you. Were you ever horseplaying as a kid or a teenager and it led to property damage and the wrath of your parents? Leave your craziest stories in the comments below. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and make sure you're back here next week for more original content. And if you enjoy the crazy stories of Reedy, now you can get them in a nostalgic, glossy magazine that looks like it came straight off a store shelf in the 90s. The Reedy Chronicles Volume 1 is a magazine of 5 Gen X short stories with extra behind-the-scenes content and bonus articles about our friendship and my writing career. Click the link in the description below to get your copy today. Don't miss out on the Reedy Chronicles Volume 1. Volume 2 will be launching soon. And I'll see you next week with another original narrative feature right here at Bill Roseberry Stories.